All right, great. It's awesome to see such a great crowd in Puerto Rico. Very excited that you guys are going to be the entrepreneurs in this community. So you guys are here because you want to build a startup. You guys want to be entrepreneurs. Yes, awesome. But what is entrepreneurship? Many people think entrepreneurship is about pursuing your dreams and building a grand vision. But I define entrepreneurship as the process of creating new value in the ecosystem. And value is defined by solving for a customer need. If you're not creating value, then you're going to have trouble acquiring customers. And 98% of startups fail because they cannot acquire customers. So today I'm going to show you a process of how you can start a startup and acquire paying customers without writing any code. And it's a process of experimenting and testing your ideas before building. It's the same process I used to build my company into a multi-million-dollar business. And I've actually failed a few times before I got the process right. So hopefully by sharing my lessons with you, it'll help you save time and succeed faster as entrepreneurs. This was my last startup. And we were running experiments and testing our assumptions, but we still failed. How did that happen? A few years ago, I had an idea to work on semantic image search and improve image search algorithms. So we developed a photo question and answer service where people can take a photo, ask a question, and get answers from the community about the photo. We started by developing our minimum viable product, and that's the MVP, which is it's an experiment with the least amount of effort to get the most amount of customer learning. But I really want to emphasize that MVP is not just any experiment. MVP is an experiment that tests your riskiest assumption. And the riskiest assumption is the assumption that you have the least amount of data around, and if disproven, will break the viability of your business. So it's essential to test your riskiest assumption first. So we started by testing our first riskiest assumption, which was, will people have photo questions to post? And we tested this with a simple page where the only functionality was upload a photo and ask a question. And that took us a few hours to just build. And we tested that. We sent it out to our network. We posted on Facebook, on Twitter. And within a few hours, we got a post saying, hey, I was in Florida. I found this duck. What is this? Is this even a bird? So we took this, and we're very excited. This is our first user, and we need to get him an answer back as soon as possible. So we go ahead and test our next riskiest assumption, which is, will someone be able to answer within a given amount of time? So we take the photo with the question, and we send that out again to our network. And within an hour, we got a response back saying, oh, that's a Muscovy duck. It's very common in Florida. This was very exciting. It was the first post, and he got a response. We took that answer back to the original poster to get his feedback about his experience. And when I did that, I found out that he actually used his flip phone at the time to upload the photo to his computer with a USB cord. This was in the early days of the iPhone, so this was before Instagram, before photo sharing was popular. It was iPhone 3, so it didn't occur to us to make a mobile app. But this key insight led to our first pivot, where we realized, oh, this should be a mobile app because of how people are using it. So we pivoted into a mobile app after 2 days. So it was pretty quick. It took us 2 days. We only built that one functionality, and we pivoted into a mobile app. The next riskiest assumption we needed to test was, will this scale? Can this be replicated? At this point, we already built, at this point, we're thinking, okay, well, in order to test this, we need to build, we tested it with one user, but can we do this with 100 people? So we need to build the app, we need to build the community and market it. So we went ahead and started building the app, and we launched 6 months later, only to come crashing down. We couldn't get users. And that was devastating because we thought we had validated the idea. We were talking to users when we were working on the app. We were constantly interviewing people. So what went wrong? In order to find out, I had to go back to the drawing board and start from scratch. And this time I had a clear sense of who my target user was. So I'm thinking, these are people who like to take photos on their phone. And I went out and interviewed these people to understand what kind of photos do they take, why do they take these photos, and were there situations when they want to learn more about the photos they took. So I did my interviews, and I realized that people did not care about this. It wasn't a problem. They were never in that situation where they were curious about a photo that they had on their phone and couldn't think of a use case. A lot of people, just to be nice, they were saying, oh, it's really cool, so I can take a photo of myself and ask if I'm hot or not. That wasn't a problem we were trying to solve for. But after the interviews, I did come across a small group of people who really described the pain point and resonated with the solution. And these people were bird watchers. So they said they actually had a Google group where they would upload photos of birds that they saw, and their friends in the group would help them identify what they were looking at. And they were ecstatic. They were so excited about this app. But I realized that this was such a small market, and this was not a big enough problem for me to solve. So I decided to stop working on it. Funny enough, a few months later, another startup launched with the same exact idea. And these were Stanford students in Palo Alto. So they raised $2 million, launched the app. It was sitting in the App Store for a while. 2 years later, they realized, OK, people are not using our app. So they were running out of money. They couldn't raise any more money. They laid off their employees, and they quit. So that was they wasted 2 years and $2 million before realizing that they were not solving for a problem. And if you've been following the news, earlier this year, back in January, the co-founder of Twitter, Biz Stone, launched the same exact idea called Jelly. And he launched in TechCrunch. So when he launched, the traffic spiked up. Everyone was using it. But you can see, a few weeks later, user engagement plummeted. And now, I don't know anyone who uses it. They raised $30 million, Series B, just because he was the co-founder of Twitter. But we'll see where that goes. So in my process, I made a few key mistakes that led me to false validation and led me to building something that no one wanted without realizing it. The first mistake was I tested the wrong assumption. So the first riskiest assumption I tested was actually a solution-oriented assumption. And if you really want to validate need and save time, you test your assumption around a customer problem hypothesis instead of a solution. The second mistake I made was asking the wrong questions. So naturally, if I'm testing the wrong assumption, I'm testing with the wrong questions. But I was also asking questions to test if the app was easy to use, not if it needed to be used. So I was coming from a background as a user experience designer, so I thought, okay, usability and branding and user experience is everything. But turns out it's not important when you're doing early idea validation. My third mistake was I didn't define success. So how do I know if this experiment is successful? We needed to define a success metric. And I didn't do that. So we had one excited user, but does that mean that it's a big enough problem? Does that mean there's a huge demand out there? No. But if you don't set a success metric, you're going to fall into the trap of confirmation bias, where you're going to take initial validation as permission to go full speed ahead. And that's what we did. My fourth mistake was I don't need to build anything to test that third assumption of, will this scale? And later I'll show you an example of how you can test that assumption, will it scale, without writing a line of code. So these 4 mistakes were very key in me building something without realizing that there was a problem. And it's a mistake that I see a lot of entrepreneurs make. So now that you know these mistakes, you should avoid them and be aware of when you're making these mistakes. It's very common for entrepreneurs as entrepreneurs, you have to be very confident, but it's also very common for entrepreneurs to be so confident that they believe in their idea so much that even though data is coming back saying there is no problem, there is no use case, they're still charging forward. Since then, I've spent the last few years helping other entrepreneurs avoid these mistakes by designing effective experiments so they can succeed. I've done this, these are my 2 companies, so I've done this by developing 2 tools that help you design effective experiments quickly. And the first tool is called the experiment board. It's a transparent experimentation framework where you can see how to design an experiment and share the process with your team. You can also download it at that link. I'll also tweet out the bit.ly link after. The second tool I've developed is called Quick MVP. That's quickmvp.com. And basically, it's the easiest way to test your business idea in 5 minutes. And I'll show you how I used these 2 tools to test the need for a new startup idea and generate revenue within 3 days. So that's a big difference from my last startup. As a user experience designer, I was always getting requests from startup founders to help them with their website. And I also knew designers who needed more projects, so I thought, why not connect the 2? But before writing any code and building the marketplace and building the community, I knew better this time. So I started off by defining my customer. So you heard this morning, it's very important to define who your customer is. I started off by defining my customer as bootstrap startup founders, and I defined their problem. So this problem is defined from their perspective. It's what is the customer's problem that you're trying to solve? And you want to explore what their problem is first. So I defined the problem as getting user experience feedback, and I'm not defining the solution yet because the solution is something that we need to avoid, and we need to validate the problem first before we can move on to the solution. Then I'm testing my riskiest assumption. So my riskiest assumption here is no reliable source. I'm saying that these startup founders have no reliable source of getting user experience feedback. And this is my riskiest assumption because I know that they already have a problem of getting user experience feedback because they're always asking me for help. But what I didn't know was, are they satisfied with their current solutions? Are they satisfied with current alternatives? If they are satisfied, then there's no room in the market for me to build something, and there's not a big enough problem to solve for. So that was my riskiest assumption. Then I had to define my success criteria. So I set my experiment as an interview experiment, where I'm saying I will interview 10 of these startup founders, and I need at least 6 of them to indicate that they have this problem of they have this frustration in order for me to proceed. Now you might be wondering how I set the success criteria. And the success criteria is the weakest outcome you will accept as validation in order to proceed. And in the very early stages, when you're in exploration stage of the startup, the success criteria is very subjective to the entrepreneur because you don't have any other benchmark to measure against. But when you're building your business, your success criteria can be defined by opportunity cost to build a new feature. It can be defined by the metric that you need to hit in order to bring your business to the next milestone. So that's the success criteria. And now that we have defined our experiment, these are the components of an effective experiment. It's the customer problem. You're not defining the solution yet, and then it's the riskiest assumption, and then how you will test it, and how you will know you're successful. So now that I have the experiment designed, I can run my experiment by doing my exploration interviews. In exploration interviews, you're going out to where your customers are, and you're interviewing them to understand and explore their scenario, their problems, and understand how you can better solve their challenges. So I did my exploration interviews with these startup founders, and these are the questions that I asked them to test my assumption. And so it says, I'm doing some research around, so that's a good way to open up the conversation. I'm doing some research around this. Can you help me out? Have you ever experienced this problem? If so, well, tell me about the last time you experienced that problem. What did you do? So the last 3 questions are the ones that give me deeper insight into testing my riskiest assumption. What did you do to solve for your problem? How satisfied were you with the outcome? If unsatisfied, how else have you tried to solve it? So this gives me an indicator of how frustrated they are with existing alternatives and if they are frustrated enough to keep looking for solutions. As I do these interviews, I'm also collecting key data points that will help drive my decision as to what to do next. So key data points are the level of pain and frustration with the problem, frequency of the problem, what are they doing to solve that problem, so existing behavior to solve for that problem, and how much time and money are they spending to find a solution and solve that problem for themselves. So once I got this data, I came back and I analyzed my data. And it turns out that a lot of the startup founders that I interviewed resonated with this frustration. And they said, yes, I actually go to my friends to get feedback on the website. I go to classes. They actually were taking classes on user experience so that they can try to solve the problem themselves. And some of them were going to meetup groups to find designers to help them out. And they all said that it was very time-consuming and that they would rather be working on their startup instead of focusing on finding designers. So that gave me enough confidence to move forward, saying, okay, there is a problem here that I can solve for. Let's move forward and run my next experiment. Since it's validated, I can stay with the same customer problem hypothesis, and now I'm just defining a solution. So my solution to solve this problem is virtual user experience feedback. And my riskiest assumption is, will they pay for this? So that's so important because early on you want to understand, is what I'm building any value to these customers? And how do you test for value? You test for value by charging people to use the service. So my riskiest assumption is, will they pay for this virtual user experience feedback? I set up a pitch experiment, which is basically I'm pitching and selling the solution to them and testing if they will pay me. And I set my success criteria as 8 out of 10. So basically, the 10 startup founders I interviewed, at least 8 of them have to pay me $10 in order for me to validate the idea and move forward. So this is how I set up my pitch experiment. This is a pitch experiment. Basically, it's a landing page with a call to action where you're stating the price point that you're charging. So over here, I'm charging $10. You get 1 user experience feedback if you pay me $10. And I sent this page out to the startup founders I interviewed, and I tested if they would actually click through and pay me $10. The trick here is that I did not build anything. There was no website that was built behind this page. It was just a form. So after they clicked that button to pay me $10, they just had to fill out this form. And they actually did pay me $10 because I had a payment button on there too, and they did put in their credit card information and pay me $10. But this was the trick. So this is how you can actually test your idea and test how much people are willing to pay for it before writing a line of code. Now I did this, and all 10 of them actually paid me $10. And feedback that I got was, yeah, I don't mind the virtual. It seems very convenient. And it's actually $10 is pretty cheap. I could have afford more. So that was good. That was a good insight to get early on before I even build anything. Now that I've tested and validated the first side of the market, I have to test the second side of the market. It's a 2-sided market. So the second side of the market, it's user experience designers. So I validated the demand side. Will people pay for the service? Now I have to test the supply side. So supply is user experience designers have a problem getting clients for quick user experience consulting. And I'm jumping right into the solution now because I know that it is already a problem, that I know that they already want to get more consulting gigs, but I don't know if they're willing to do it online. So that's why I'm testing the solution first, because that's the riskier side here. And my riskiest assumption is, will they consult virtually? I set up another pitch experiment, And this time I set my success criteria as 8 out of 10, so it's just a good benchmark to set for me. And I went out and interviewed these designers to find out who they were, how long they've been practicing for. So I started off with some exploratory questions, like from the exploration interviews. Started off with exploratory questions, and then I started pitching them the solution. And it's funny because when I started pitching them, they all looked at me like this. Their eyebrows raised, their jaw dropped, they were in shock. Some of them were offended. And it was funny because, I was like, well, that's confusing. I thought they would be interested in this, but why are they not interested? And it turns out they're not interested because these were designers who had 5 to 10 years of consulting experience, so they already built up a client base that they trusted, and they were very picky about the new clients that they brought in. So they had an established client base. Trust was very important to them. They were not willing to go online to find random new clients to work with. So they weren't interested. But something that they all said during the interviews was, they said, when I first started out, when I first graduated college and got into user experience, I was eager to take on any project I could. So that was the key insight that led me to my customer segment pivot, which is transitioning to user experience designers. So it's not all UX designers who have this problem. I need to focus in on who has this problem the most. So my customer segment pivot, I'm focusing on people who are new to user experience, and I'm setting the same problem that they have a problem getting user experience consulting gigs. And I'm testing the same solution with the same risk assumption. Are they willing to consult virtually? I set my pitch criteria to 60% this time because I'm going to run the experiment online instead of in person, so I expect there to be a lower conversion rate, but I still think this is a huge problem, so I still want a high metric for myself. Set up a pitch experiment, another page, and this time I targeted the right people to go to this page with Google Ads. So basically what I'm doing is I need to find these people who are interested in user experience, who are transitioning to user experience careers, and I'm just putting in the keywords that they would search for and targeting those people with an ad. And I'm not building anything, so no backend, just a form. So it's just a landing page, Google Ads, and a form to collect data. And this technique that we're using here is what my product Quick MVP does. Quick MVP is a landing page creator and a Google Ad creator in one tool, so you can test your ideas in 5 minutes. And so this technique, what it measures is customer intent. So chances are the people who have a problem and they're searching for a solution, they're searching for it on Google. And when they see your ad and they have the problem badly enough, they'll click on your ad, see if you can solve the problem, go to your page, click on the button, and then fill out their information so that you can get in touch with them. And by doing this kind of experiment, you can calculate your customer acquisition costs and customer lifetime value up front without building anything. So I ran this experiment. I got 37 email addresses out of 184 clicks. And this is actually pretty low, compared to the success criteria I had set for myself. It was lower. And technically, if it's lower, I should pivot, because I should pivot away from this idea, because it's saying, the data is saying, oh, there's not enough demand here. But something interesting happened during this experiment that gave me a nice signal. And what I found was, looking at the email addresses and the form data, a couple of people were actually coming to it because a friend told them about it. And this was interesting because the traffic was no longer coming from Google Ads. It was coming from people sharing this page with their friends saying, hey, you have to check this out. So that's how people were coming to the page. And the friend referral was a good signal for me to persevere with this idea and run another experiment to test, is there something here? So at this point, I've validated both sides of the market. I validated the demand side and the supply side, and now I have to connect the two. I can connect the two by running a concierge experiment. And a concierge experiment is manually delivering the service. So let's see how we do that. I'm focusing back on the demand side, on the bootstrap startup founders who already paid me $10 and they're expecting to get feedback on their website. And I'm running the experiment called a concierge where I'm testing, is this online service sufficient for the startup founders? And I have my success criteria as 60%. So 60% of them need to be satisfied in order for me to move forward. So this is what's going on. We have the startup founder who submitted their request on the page, and we have the designer who signed up for the service looking for projects. Now, they probably think the website is built. They probably think they're automatically getting connected to the right people. But it was really me automating the whole process. So what happened was the startup founder would submit their request. They filled out that form. And when they filled out that form and paid me, that I would get an email. And I would forward that email to a designer who would then write some feedback and send it back to me, and I would forward that back to the startup founder. And I did this 16 times to understand how would this business scale, what were the flaws in the service, and what were the biggest pain points that I should address first. So remember how I said in the beginning that you don't need to build your application in order to test, will this scale? This is the technique that you can use to test, will this service, will this idea scale without writing any code. So after I conducted this experiment, I actually got a lower satisfaction rate than I expected. They said that it was helpful. You know, it was solving their problem. It got the feedback faster, so they didn't have to go out and find designers and get feedback. It was just automatically all virtual. So they were satisfied with that part, but they were unsatisfied because they wanted more interaction with the designer. So they wanted to be able to ask the designer clarifying questions based on the feedback. They wanted to be able to follow up with them again. So this, again, it's qualitative data, and so this is the art and science of lean startup. It's not necessarily all quantitative hard data. You want to get the qualitative data back as well so you can understand, well, we did not meet our success criteria, but why did we not meet our success criteria? It's because they want this more functionality. So that gave me enough confidence to move forward, and the next step would be to iterate, because it is creating value for them. It solved the problem and it delivered the service really fast for them, so they were satisfied, but they wanted more functionality. So running these experiments helps you focus on building what matters, because as an entrepreneur, you might think you have to build this huge website, you have to build all this functionality, but if you run this experiment, you will understand what the biggest pain points are to solve for first. So you can just, streamline one part of the functionality before you focus on testing the next part. So really, this is the effective way to start your startup. And if you keep doing this process of testing your ideas and running experiments, then you'll succeed faster. Thank you.